destroyed my city. It killed my parents outside of a movie theater when I was a kid. Or they abandoned me there, I forget which. There can be only one way to fight back. I must become a symbol of the night. A force of fear for criminals or a cowardly and superstitious lot. I am Batman.
Sir, I represent the estate of Bob Kane and DC Comics. A judge has issued an immediate cease and desist order for this unauthorized parody of the DC Comics property Batman. If you persist, you will be sued in open court. Good day.
Well, would it be alright with you if I just sat here stewing in my own bitter resentment over the state of modern-day comic books?
Yes, that will be satisfactory.
Excellent. Then I shall be forever known as the Amazing Spider.
Sir!
Okay, fine. I'll just be the Last Angry Geek. Call me that. Enjoy the show.
You don't seem that angry to me, more bitter and pathetic.
Yeah, but that don't get the likes and subscribes, you dig? And welcome back to Comic Book Issues. I'm your host, the Last Angry Geek. What can be said about Frank Miller, the writer of Batman Year One, that can't also be said about the director of the movie Year One, the late Harold Ramis? Well, that sucked. I prefer his work in the 80s. Sorry, Harold. Frank? Holy Terror? Really? Some stories just resonate. They become a part of the collective unconscious and synonymous with the character in question. Batman is a great example of this. There are stories everyone thinks about with him, be it The Dark Knight Returns or The Killing Joke, or a story that had a huge part in influencing the 2005 film Batman Begins. It's a special flashback episode as we review the 4-issue story arc of Batman by David Mazzucchelli and Frank Miller, Year One.
In Gotham City, Detective James Gordon and Bruce Wayne arrive. James from a police force job in Chicago and Bruce from 12 years abroad. Jim is met by Detective Flass and taken to the offices of Commissioner Loeb as Bruce reunites with his butler Alfred at Wayne Manor. Gordon watches Flass beat up a youth and Jim recognizes Green Beret training. Flass passes off the beating as just a misunderstanding. That comb sure looked like a knife. Later, Flass tries to get Gordon to play ball with the corrupt police force. He has a baby on the way after all. Jim says to call him Lieutenant. Loeb and Flass decide to send Gordon a message. Bruce gets ready to go out for a first time. Almost anonymous, save for a fake scar that will draw people's attention. In a police garage, 4 men ambush Jim Gordon. He fights back but is quickly taken down. Beaten, not crippled, he hears Flass's distinctive laugh.
Sorry, Flass, I just don't think I can throw the review for you or your crooked cop friends.
Hey, you gotta do the right thing, geek. You gotta learn to play ball.
In Gotham's red light district, Bruce is propositioned by a young girl named Holly. Her pimp brushes her off. She needs to recognize who wants it. Bruce plays off as though he is interested, catching the attention of a hooker named Selina. The pimp, convinced Bruce is a cop, swings a knife at him. He punches the pimp, but Holly stabs him in the thigh and the other hookers rush him. Selina literally jumps to Holly's defense, but he knocks her out as the police arrive. Bruce is shot and arrested. He comes to in a police car and breaks his handcuffs. He gets the car to crash and makes an escape. After his attack, Gordon finds out that Flass is at a poker game. He waits for him to leave and then runs him off the road. He first forces Flass to drop his gun and then throws him a baseball bat. The fight should be even. He beats Flass up, leaving him stripped and handcuffed, knowing Flass won't report this. This is what it takes to be a cop in Gotham. Alone in his father's library, Bruce is bleeding from his gunshot. This isn't working. He could summon Alfred, but he would rather die now than fail. He remembers his parents' murder, and it's at that point that a gigantic bat breaks through his window. It lands on his father's bust, and he remembers a time a bat frightened him. He rings the bell. As Gordon rushes to a hostage situation, one of his men informs him that Loeb is sending in SWAT. Run by Officer Brandon, SWAT is essentially Loeb's enforcers. This could be a massacre, but Gordon stops them and enters unarmed. He punches out the gunmen and rescues the child hostages. He's beginning to get good press, even as he has less and less time for his pregnant wife, Barbara. A now costumed Batman tries to stop a robbery, almost causing a man to fall to his death. He manages to save him, even as the man's accomplices beat him down. There's a briefing where Lieutenant Gordon, his new detective, Sarah Essen, and the rest of the force listen to Flass's encounter with the Batman. Batman broke up a fencing ring, paying off Flass, and the cop is humiliated as the police force laughs at his description of a winged, claw-spraying vigilante. At a dinner for Commissioner Loeb, crime lord Carmine Falcone cites Batman and the assistant district attorney Harvey Dent as cause for concern when the Batman breaks in and lays down the law. This is his city now. After that, Gordon begins staging crimes in the hope of arresting Batman, but he's never fooled by them. Meanwhile, Batman continues to humiliate Falcone. Gordon investigates Harvey Dent, but he's not Batman. He's just working with Batman.
So much gay porn starts off the same way, with a man hiding at crotch level. I mean, I would assume it does.
Acid suggests that Bruce Wayne, with his money and dead parents, is a good candidate for the vigilante. It's just that a driver loses control of his truck and it heads towards a bag lady. Jim jumps in the truck and tries to save the woman, as out of nowhere Batman swoops in, pushing her out of the way. Batman takes cover, pursued by Gordon and the police in an abandoned building. Loeb orders it firebombed. As the building implodes around him, the vigilante barely manages to save his own life. Across town, Holly and Selina are woken up by the explosion. As Essen is taken to the hospital, the girls decide to head over to see the commotion. Brandon and his SWAT team head in and find the electrical trapdoor that Batman hid under. Except he's not there, and soon a giant beam falls on top of the door, trapping the men inside. When Gordon won't send his own men in, Loeb dispatches more SWAT. Wounded, and with his utility belt completely destroyed, he activates a device on his boot.
Has this ever happened to you? You're fighting crime, and just when things get super tense, you get a foot cramp. You take your boot off and put it aside to massage your toes when all of a sudden... Well, now there's a way to stop your shoe from being stolen. Boot Jack. Simply install this small tracking device into your boot, and the next time it gets stolen, it'll immediately blow up.
What?
As every single bat in Gotham begins heading towards Batman, Brandon crawls out of a chimney, but gets a blow dart for his trouble. Batman barely avoids the SWAT's gunfire, although he does take the time to throw a stray cat out the window, which runs to Selina's arms, even as bullets then shoot out into the street, hitting civilians. With tear gas and debris blinding the SWAT, Batman fights them off as the bat swarm arrives, scaring off onlookers and blinding the cops. Batman has escaped again. Later, Gordon continues to try and pin down Wayne's whereabouts, even as he and Essen grow closer. Bruce, while establishing an alibi, realizes he needs a man on the inside, someone he can trust. He'd like it to be James Gordon. Tired of this life, Selina takes out her pimp. She and Holly are going into a new line of work. After a late-night cup of coffee caught in the rain, Jim and Sarah kiss. In her new outfit, Selina begins to prowl the streets as Catwoman. Alone, being a cop in a city where a vigilante saves lives and the cops extort money and murder at will, with a pregnant wife and a guilty conscience, James Gordon is finding it harder and harder to be a good cop in Gotham. Gordon breaks things off with Essen. 3 days later, they're kissing even after she's put in for a transfer. Harvey Dent lets a criminal back onto the streets, but this is so Batman can track him down and force him to confess to even more crimes and write out Flash to Gordon. With Flash potentially on the chopping block, Loeb threatens to expose Gordon's affair to his wife in order to keep him in line. Jim and Barbara then meet with Bruce Wayne, who plays the part of bumbling playboy to a T. On their way home, in the car, Jim stops and confesses his affair to his wife. Therefore, the blackmail no longer has any effect. The original informant, Skeevers, almost dies after being poisoned, and James Gordon Jr. is born. Upset that Catwoman isn't getting any press, she targets the Roman for her next burglary. As Carmine meets with his nephew Johnny to arrange a hit, Catwoman attacks just as Batman arrives. They take down the mob enforcers, with Catwoman leaving her scars on Carmine Falcone's face. Bruce is upset. That woman interrupted his surveillance of the Roman and lost him the information on who they were targeting. Although, in order to avoid bad publicity, they wouldn't murder someone, so that leaves blackmail or... Getting up to feed his baby, James is called into work. On his way to the station, he passes a motorcyclist speeding towards his house. He gets nervous and returns to the garage to find his wife and son being kidnapped by Johnny, Carmine's nephew. He knows if they get in that car, he'll never see them again, so he opens fire, saving his wife, but Johnny peels out with James Jr. The mysterious motorcyclist starts to take off after him, but Gordon shoots him and steals his bike to go after his son. Barbara pulls a gun on the motorcyclist, who asks her to let him save her boy. Gordon shoots out a tire on the bridge and the car crashes. Johnny emerges with the baby and tries to stab Gordon. They struggle, and the baby goes off the bridge. A third figure grabs the child even as Johnny and James go over too. In the mud, he hands James Jr. back to his father. Without his glasses, Gordon can't really be sure of who the man is and tells him to leave. In short order, Flash goes to jail, Loeb is forced to resign as a result of the scandal, and the Roman goes to war with his sister after he tries to kill Johnny to shut him up. There's a new figure in the underworld. Calls himself the Joker, but Gordon now has a friend who can help him. He'll be here any minute.
If that closing scene seems familiar to you, it's because that's exactly how Batman Begins ended. Also, in its sequel, The Dark Knight, you remember that Batman saves Commissioner Gordon's son when he goes over a cliff, just like here. So does iconic mean good? And given Frank Miller's propensity for over-the-top stories, where does year one fall? Let's take a closer look.
There have been a lot of retellings of Batman's origins, but few focusing on his first days in Gotham City. Those early times when he was honing his craft and learning who he was. And yes, year one is one of those stories, but it's really more about James Gordon's first year in the Gotham police force rather than Bruce refining his Batman gimmick. We see how Gordon really comes to understand Gotham and how it can destroy good cops. He's expected to play ball, but when he sticks to his principles and makes a name for himself, he faces enemies from every level of the police department. There's also outside forces working on him. The long hours and cases that only fellow policemen can understand puts a strain on his marriage and drives him into the arms of a fellow police officer. In fact, one of my few gripes with this book is that Sarah Essen just appears. We should have been privy to her first meeting with Jim Gordon, so we can see his feelings for her go through their natural cycle of respect to attraction to guilt and rejection. All these things ground Gordon and help him grow into the man Batman needs, a cop that understands Gotham. Although another small gripe is that Batman spends all of one panel deciding Jim Gordon is the man he needs on the inside. While we see Gordon recognize and appreciate Batman's good nature throughout the story, I wish we'd seen Batman's side of appreciating Jim a little better. As for Batman himself, we do get to see Bruce's despair that he's not being the effective force of change he always envisioned himself being. Again, something I wish we'd spent more time on, but his moments as Batman, his stumbling to keep criminals alive and putting the corrupt elite on notice are perfect moments for the winged vigilante. Most of the villainous characters are throwaways that Frank Miller never had any intention of revisiting. Ironically, that led to my personal favorite Batman story of all time, The Long Halloween, after Jeff Loeb got Miller's permission to revisit the Roman Carmine Falcone and tell the story of how supervillains replaced the gangsters. Speaking of villains, it's a smart idea, Harvey Dent cameo aside, not to bring in any named supervillains for this story. That makes sure we keep the focus on Batman and Gotham, which is where this tale needs to be. It also keeps the story more realistic and grounded by just focusing on criminals and Batman rather than Batman and costumed villains with superpowers or super weapons. That said, the only other costume character to appear in this is Selina Kyle, Catwoman, but she's such a non-factor in the story it would almost have been better if she didn't appear in it. It's like Miller just put her in there so we can say, hey, look, that character. We just get the briefest of origin stories and then boom, she decides to be a costume thief. I suppose you could make the point that it's the earliest known example of Batman inspiring other people to dress up in costumes, but Selina's such a non-factor in this story, she's practically just page filler. David Mazzucchelli rejoins his Daredevil writer Frank Miller on these 4 issues. He has a sort of gritty, ugly way of drawing that lends itself to these urban superheroes. No one is drawn as an Adonis. Gordon's hair is rumpled and messed up. Batman at his best looks like a healthy man in tight gray spandex, lending a sense of realism and vulnerability to this origin story, making Bruce a bit more vulnerable in these times. Visually, it's very effective. Also, David is a master of expression. He manages to convey feelings of rage, confusion, smugness, all without Miller having to spell it out for us in word balloons.
At times, year one storytelling can be a bit fragmented, and the story can feel a little outdated, but there's a reason this story is considered a classic. Because it is. It elevates Jim Gordon from minor supporting character to one of the most important people in Batman's life, and shows how an unbreakable bond was formed. I give Batman Year 1 4 out of 5 stars. It's definitely a classic, but some might be put off by the fact that it's more Gordon's origin story than Batman's. And knowing my origin story will never be that interesting, I'm simply an alien who fell to Earth, was made the ward of an eccentric billionaire, and then found out I was being raised on a mythical island full of women. Ah, the good old days. This is Comic Book Issues, and I'm your host, the Last Angry Geek.